So there's no doubt in the world that we are dealing with a lot of submerged sorrows that have come out as a result of remembering the past. I know one lady came to me for discussion. She was a younger daughter, and the family would not allow her to marry until the older daughter was married. And what happened? The older daughter married the man the younger daughter wanted. Now that was a catastrophe. But it was one of those things that happened. Now that could ruin a life. But on the other hand, it didn't have to. It could be recognized as one of the circumstances of existence. It could be recognized as an opportunity to grow, to deepen, to understand, to rise above a disappointment. It perhaps to build a new value in life, simply upon a value that had not proven itself to be permanent. So every time we come upon a challenge out of the past, we either perpetuate the past or break it up, or cause something to come along that takes the edge off of it as a force to hurt us or endanger our survival. Therefore, the past is, in a sense, a kind of judge and jury. If you make the same decision that got you in trouble in the first place, you will be in trouble again. If you do not find some answer that is more reasonable, even then the old answers will hold and your life will be burdened thereby. There are all kinds of things that can happen that when we take hold of the past, the individual who hasn't spoken to a relative for 15 years can suddenly gather up the courage to send them a Christmas card and perhaps end a feud. That card went in a moment of now, something that we forbidden to do because we can do what we will until we have done something else that blocks it. So this ended a feud, and the people, older but wiser, mended a situation that had disturbed the family for years. Another individual had a very bad marriage. In this very bad marriage, with a divorce, 2 small children were involved. The mother, the children, felt that this situation was not her fault, that things had happened that should never have happened, and that somebody else was to blame. So these are the things that could be taken into the idea of dead yesterdays. But then now comes the problem of what to do to make it a dynamic living tomorrow. So when the time came to take care of the problem, the individual had to determine whether he would keep the feud going, whether he would continue to be injured, to continue to be subjected to tyranny, or whether he would grow up out of it and think of something better. Also, we find things of this kind come up in business. An individual has a job that is not very pleasant. He isn't enjoying it greatly. And in the job he's in, he makes a series of unfortunate mistakes. These are blamed on someone else, never on the person. But this costs them the job. So now we have another individual with a task which is now to their mind filled with unfairness. There's something that they have been injured that they did not deserve. In the past, their minds did not permit them to recognize the fact that they did deserve this. But if they've grown up a little into that moment which is now, they could see from the viewpoint of now why they were wrong then, and in this moment relieve themselves of a very heavy burden of memories. In fact, every time we look back into a family situation or a world situation and find it intimidating or depressing or dangerous, we have to realize that it is part of this tendency that we all have to perpetuate the sorrows that have come to us. Now we have nations today. Nations are having a very unsavory time at the moment. They're getting into all kinds of patterns that are objectionable. And most of these patterns tie back to a feud of some kind. And this feud ties back in turn to some ancient grudge that has been carefully perpetuated. Now, the grudge may have been so far back and so insignificant in itself that it is generally forgotten. the average member of the community did not even remember it, or never have heard of it. But when the time comes to create agitation or attempt a revolution, somebody digs out the old unfairness, dramatizes it, and everybody goes to work on it. And this is the same type of thing in world affairs. Nations that have carried feuds for 500 or 1,000 years break through them. A nation that has been tied down to a certain religion or a certain philosophy finally rebels against it. And after going through a certain period of purification, rises above it. Now in nations and various community projects, the idea of the past, the idea of the negative survival of mistakes just by memory alone has now become quite important. We are beginning all over the world to analyze some of these mistakes and realize that they were, most of them, unimportant, but were dramatized and magnified by years of meditation. The individual had a bad marriage, has been living that down through years of meditation also. And very often the individual who got into a trouble, or a nation that got into a difficulty, did the same thing again, and had again another example of this mistake. If you do it once, it could be anybody's fault, they say, but if you do it twice, it's yours. And this is what happens. These people have perpetuated a feud. Now, we read the newspapers and you will find out how this acts. You will find out that the minister of something or other dug up a record that his great-grandfather or something or other was mistreated. And it was a terrible thing. And therefore the clan, the family, and the country are now all back of the righting of a wrong. Everyone involved in the wrong is dead, but the grudge goes on. And it has to be cleared up. So in the problem of clearing up the grudge that we had, we may have a war or an outbreak, thousands of people killed, homes destroyed, all about something that's been gone over hundreds of years ago. It's the same way in our modern life, in our home. We are nursing grudges only for a year or two maybe, but by the course of that year we have broken a home and maybe broken the lives of children. So everywhere you go back to the negative, that is the dead past. We are reminded that it is the better part of philosophy that the dead past should bury its dead. Everything in us that carries back should be a constructive memory. Now, if we can't say that the incident itself was particularly pleasant, that can be true. But that if it's unpleasant, but it led to something, if it helped us to cure something in ourselves, it was well worth it. Therefore, if there's a grudge anywhere in our own natures, which we feel we have been slighted or wronged, our first real problem is to examine the details, maybe again over a long time in life, to find what we should have learned instead of constantly looking for an opportunity for vengeance. To revenge an evil of the past is a very common thing today, politically, socially, religiously, economically. We are constantly resentful of anything that we consider to be unfair. But the only type of unfairness that we do not resent is our own. We expect that to be given every possible consideration. Now, on the other end of the stick, in which we are concerned, we have tomorrow, the unborn future. Now, all things that exist in the moment of now will probably have some kind of survival in the future. In other words, lots of people are building futures. A lot of people are trying to create a future that will be of service to them. But supposing a person who is trying to create a better future happens to think of some of the unfair suffering he has gone through, the result is probably going to block the improvement that he hopes to gain. If the future is merely an avengement of the past, if the future is only a time in which what we hoped for or wanted, regardless of whether we deserved it or not, is going to happen, then we are again in trouble. The future, it should not be considered merely a period of the fulfillment of our desires. The future should be the fulfillment of that which is necessary. Because if it's to fulfill your desire that you make a pause, then you will be in the same place as the ones who are suffering from the past. The past may be a case in which a personal injustice was committed. If we do not correct it, then the future has no bearing for us. So two sisters have lived in the same community for many years, but haven't spoken for a long time. But these now in the future may speak to each other. If they can now speak to each other, then the future has become significant. If they continue not to speak to each other and start talking about the brotherhood of man and so forth, but do nothing themselves, then the future is simply the past projected into time to come. Now, most people in their right minds do not want the future now to be merely a projection of the present. We know that the things that we have been doing and now the past, the immediate past, is a black mark against the future. That in the times to come, if we continue as we are now, we will corrupt the future completely. We will do all the things that we shouldn't do. And we have considered the future only as a period of the fulfillment of desires. The individual has been poor all his life, hopes that before he dies he finally will make his pile of money somehow. And all those who have not succeeded may die with success on their minds. But in every instance, the future is regarded as a period of reward. The individual, something wonderful is going to happen. And that makes the future interesting, makes it enjoyable, makes it something we all like to work with and hope for. But in so doing, we have the question, what have we that we deserve that is going to make a happy future? Are we earning into the future a better destiny than we have had before? If we are simply seeking to get rid of the problems, but to continue to nurse the grievances, we are just exactly where we were. There is no way in which these things can be solved simply by shifting them into the future. The future has to have a remedial factor. It has to be something better than we have had before. Therefore, the future must be based upon the past as wrong, and then present a problem of now. And when you get through realizing that we were wrong in the first place, that the problem is that we brought forward into the present and now think to take it into the future, unsolved political problems, unsolved family problems, unsolved world economic issues, then we cannot expect anything very fortunate. We have to recognize the importance of the future correcting mistakes. Now, I've been watching the newspaper as it comes out now. Someone notes we're in trouble for oil. We just had another tanker go up and a great loss of oil. And but somebody in their mind thinks, well, probably by the time we need it, we'll discover another place where there's plenty of oil. We will have another one. Or if we do not have another one, we will use something else instead of oil. We will find a way out of this difficulty without changing ourselves, without changing our own desire to do exactly as we please. We want certain things, but we will not suffer for them. They must be made pleasant and happy. Now, if the karmic laws that were recognized in the Orient actually hold good, but nearly every problem we have today is ancient business. We are now in the midst of problems that should have been solved 5,000 or 10,000 years ago. But because they were not solved then, they were carried on to 1,000 years from now, and we had another chance at them and muffed it again. Now it's only a year or two to pick up the same problem. It's always done the same thing to us. We know definitely inside ourselves that we cannot